Amara, a radiant young woman with dreams of becoming a fashion designer, stood in her modest family home in Abeokuta. Her eyes glistened with unspoken dreams, but her heart sank as her parents explained their decision. Her father, facing insurmountable debt, had arranged her marriage to Chief Babalola, a wealthy business magnate in his late 60s. The promise of financial security for her family shackled her dreams. At the wedding ceremony, Amara, adorned in a breathtaking gold and emerald traditional Nigerian gown, was a vision of reluctant beauty. Chief Babalola, wearing a luxurious agbada embroidered with gold, smiled triumphantly. The lavish ceremony took place in an opulent garden, surrounded by golden lights, fountains, and an orchestra playing soft music. Yet, amidst the grandeur, Amara felt trapped in a gilded cage. The sprawling estate of Chief Babalola was a place of unimaginable luxury. Amara spent her days wandering its endless halls, feeling like a ghost in a palace. It was on one of these lonely walks that she first saw him, Deo, Chief Babalola's estranged son. Deo had returned to the estate reluctantly, summoned by his father to assist with a family business deal. Handsome and confident, with a sharp jawline and a keen gaze, he carried himself with an air of quiet defiance. Amara noticed him from across the garden courtyard, where he was sketching designs for a business pitch. Their eyes met briefly, and Amara felt an unexplainable connection. But she quickly looked away, fearing what such feelings might mean. Deo, intrigued by the sadness in her eyes, found himself drawn to her, despite the impossibility of their situation. Their first conversation took place by the estate's grand fountain under the glow of the setting sun. It started as an exchange of polite pleasantries, but quickly grew into a discussion about dreams and the burdens of family. Deo's words gave Amara hope for the first time since her marriage, but their budding connection would be a dangerous secret they would have to guard. As days turned into weeks, Amara and Deo found themselves drawn to each other in ways they could not deny. They shared secret conversations in the bright, open spaces of the estate, the sunlit veranda, the vibrant rose garden, and the grand, marble-tiled atrium. One afternoon, they met in the library, a bright and airy room filled with floor-to-ceiling windows. Deo, leaning casually against a bookshelf, told Amara about his dream of starting his own company to help young African entrepreneurs. Amara, in turn, confessed her passion for fashion design, something she had buried under the weight of her new life. Their conversations were a source of hope for Amara, who began to smile more freely, though she remained acutely aware of the danger in her feelings. Deo, too, knew the risk, but found himself unable to resist her warmth. Their connection deepened one sunny afternoon when Deo surprised Amara with a sketch he had made. A design for a dress inspired by her beauty and grace. Amara was overwhelmed, not just by the gesture, but by the realization that she was falling for him. Amara's days grew brighter, not because her circumstances had changed, but because Deo's presence made her feel seen. She began to anticipate their accidental meetings around the estate. A shared smile across the garden, a brief exchange of words near the grand staircase, or the moments they spent silently enjoying the soft breeze by the outdoor pool. Chief Babalola remained oblivious to the growing connection between his wife and his son, too preoccupied with his business ventures. He often praised Amara for her grace and poise, considering her an adornment to his status. Meanwhile, Deo kept his feelings hidden, aware of the fragile balance they walked. One evening, during a family dinner, Chief Babalola mentioned his plans to involve Deo in an upcoming international business deal. The announcement caused a subtle tension at the table. Amara, seated beside the chief, tried to remain composed, but her fingers trembled slightly. Deo noticed and clenched his fists under the table. After dinner, Amara wandered to the estate's glass conservatory, filled with exotic plants and flowers, seeking solace. Deo found her there, sitting among the fragrant blooms, her eyes glistening with unspoken emotions. He didn't speak, instead, he sat quietly beside her, offering silent comfort. The air was thick with unspoken words, but neither dared to break the silence. Amara's life became a balancing act. She had to maintain her role as the dutiful wife of Chief Babalola while carefully avoiding any suspicion about her growing bond with Deo. Their connection deepened without words, through stolen glances, shared silences, and the comfort of knowing someone understood their unspoken pain. One afternoon, Amara accompanied Chief Babalola to an exclusive gala held at the estate. The mansion's vast ballroom was a picture of grandeur, adorned with crystal chandeliers, golden decor, and an elegant crowd. Amara, dressed in a stunning ivory lace gown, radiated grace as she moved through the room on her husband's arm. Deo, standing in the corner of the room, watched her with a guarded expression. He felt torn between his father's expectations and his undeniable feelings for her. When their eyes met briefly, Amara's cheeks flushed, and she quickly looked away. Later that evening, while Chief Babalola entertained guests, Amara stepped out onto the balcony to catch her breath. Deo found her there, his footsteps light on the marble floor. He didn't speak, but handed her a folded note, their fingers brushing briefly. Amara looked at him, her heart pounding, but she said nothing. The note remained unread in her hand as Deo walked away, disappearing into the glittering ballroom. The tension between them had reached a boiling point, but they both knew the consequences of crossing the line. Amara's life began to unravel as the weight of her emotions became harder to conceal. Chief Babalola started to notice her distracted demeanor. Though he dismissed it as mere adjustment to her new life, a seed of doubt had been planted. One afternoon, Chief Babalola summoned Deo to his study. The room, adorned with shelves of rare books and an imposing mahogany desk, was where the chief conducted his most serious conversations. He confronted Deo about his behavior, accusing him of neglecting the family's business and spending too much time around the estate. Deo maintained a calm facade, assuring his father that he was focused on his responsibilities. But beneath his composed exterior, he worried that the chief's suspicions might grow. Meanwhile, Amara retreated to the estate's grand terrace to gather her thoughts. She gazed out at the sprawling gardens, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Could Chief Babalola sense the unspoken bond between her and Deo? As Amara stood lost in thought, Deo approached her cautiously. They exchanged no words, but their eyes said everything. The risk of being seen didn't deter them, their connection had grown too strong to ignore. Deo placed a hand gently on her shoulder before retreating once more into the shadows, leaving Amara to wrestle with her feelings. The fragile balance of secrecy began to crumble when Chief Babalola's trusted aide, Mr. Ade, reported that he had seen Deo and Amara together too often. Though he dismissed it as harmless, Chief Babalola's suspicion grew. Amara found herself increasingly watched. The once liberating walks around the estate now felt like a cage tightening around her. Chief Babalola's sudden, probing questions only added to her anxiety. Yet, Deo's silent support gave her strength. One evening, during a formal dinner hosted by Chief Babalola for his business associates, the tension reached a peak. Amara, dressed in a stunning royal blue gown adorned with pearls, sat beside the chief, her every movement scrutinized by him. Deo was seated across the table, his expression neutral, but his eyes restless. During the event, a moment of betrayal unfolded. Mr. Ade casually mentioned to Chief Babalola that Deo had spent time in the conservatory with Amara. Though Mr. Ade's tone was light, the implication was clear. Chief Babalola's gaze darkened, and the atmosphere in the room grew cold. Later that night, Chief Babalola cornered Amara in the grand hallway. "What are you hiding from me?" he demanded, his voice low but filled with menace. Amara froze, unable to respond, as the weight of the moment threatened to shatter her carefully maintained facade. The days following the confrontation felt suffocating for Amara. Chief Babalola's demeanor had shifted from doting to controlling. His every move seemed calculated, his presence looming over every corner of the estate. Amara felt trapped, her every step under scrutiny. Deo, sensing her distress, took greater risks. To comfort her. Their meetings became more secretive, short whispers in the garden, fleeting moments in the estate's quieter wings. Each encounter was laced with fear, but the bond between them only deepened. One night, Amara found a letter slipped under her door. It was from Deo. He wrote that he had uncovered something alarming. Chief Babalola's business empire was under threat, and his desperation to protect his fortune could lead to dangerous decisions. Amara felt the walls closing in. She couldn't decipher if Deo's letter was meant as a warning for her to flee or a plea for her to stand by his side. That evening, Chief Babalola summoned her to his study. The room, bathed in warm lamplight, felt stifling. "You've been distant," he said, his voice calm but edged with suspicion. "I hope there's nothing you're hiding, Amara. Because in this house, secrets come with consequences." As Amara sat across from him, a storm brewing in her mind, a loud commotion erupted from the hallway. She heard Deo's voice raised in argument with Mr. Ade. Amara's heart raced as Chief Babalola stood, his eyes narrowing with anger. The door to the study swung open, revealing Deo standing defiant. "Father, we need to talk now," he said, his tone cutting through the tension like a blade. Atmosphere in the study was electric with tension as Deo and Chief Babalola locked eyes. Amara, sitting silently, felt trapped between the two men. "You're reckless, Deo," Chief Babalola began, his voice low but firm. "You think you can come in here and make demands? This is my house, my legacy. You'll respect it or leave." Deo didn't flinch. "Your legacy is built on lies, father. And if you're not careful, it will all come crashing down." Chief Babalola's face hardened, his authority being openly challenged for the first time. Amara's heart pounded as she realized the conversation had shifted into dangerous territory. The tension reached its breaking point when Deo turned to Amara. "You don't have to live like this," he said, his voice softening. "There's a life beyond these walls." "Enough!" Chief Babalola roared, slamming his hand on the desk. "You dare speak to her like that in my presence?" At that moment, Mr. Ade appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Chief, we have a problem," he said cautiously, glancing at Deo and Amara. "What now?" Chief Babalola growled. "There's been a breach in the family's financial records. Someone has been leaking information about your business deals," Mr. Ade revealed. Chief Babalola's gaze darted between Deo and Amara, his mind racing. Suspicion clouded his eyes. "This ends now," he declared, his voice cold. Deo stepped forward. "No, father. This is just the beginning." Chief Babalola's study felt like a battlefield, the air thick with anger and unspoken truths. Amara sat frozen in her chair, her hands trembling as the intensity of the confrontation deepened. Deo stepped closer to his father, his voice sharp. "You've built this empire on corruption and deceit, and now it's unraveling. You betrayed not just your business partners, but the people who trusted you." Chief Babalola's face turned a deep shade of red. "You know nothing about what it takes to run an empire. Everything I've done was to protect this family and its legacy." Mr. Ade, still standing in the doorway, cleared his throat. "Chief, the breach is worse than we thought. Confidential files have been sent to the authorities. They're demanding an explanation." The room fell silent for a moment before Chief Babalola's gaze turned to Amara. "What do you know about this?" he demanded, his voice cold and piercing. Amara's breath hitched. "I don't know anything," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But Chief Babalola wasn't convinced. His suspicion grew as he connected the dots. "You've been spending far too much time with Deo," he accused, his tone laced with venom. "Are you working with him against me?" Deo stepped forward, placing himself between Amara and his father. "Leave her out of this," he said firmly. "This has nothing to do with her." Chief Babalola's eyes narrowed, his voice trembling with rage. "You've always been a disappointment, Deo. But this is betrayal." At that moment, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder. Mr. Ade looked alarmed. "Chief, it's the authorities. They're here." Amara's eyes widened in terror. Deo turned to her, his expression calm but urgent. "Stay close to me," he whispered. Chief Babalola's empire was collapsing around him, and the secrets he had worked so hard to bury were about to be exposed. The mansion was alive with chaos as the sirens outside blared louder, their lights cutting through the night. Amara clung to the edge of her chair, her heartbeat racing. Chief Babalola paced the study, his anger boiling over, while Deo stood unmoving, his expression a mix of defiance and calm resolve. "They won't get to me," Chief Babalola muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "I have connections. This will be handled." Deo spoke up, his voice sharp. "You think you can buy your way out of this, father? Those days are over." Chief Babalola's glare could have cut steel. "And what would you know about it, Deo? You've done nothing but undermine me at every turn." Amara rose quietly, stepping to the corner of the room as tension thickened. She could feel the storm brewing, but she also felt the weight of Deo's gaze on her. When their eyes met, it was as if the world paused for a moment. He gave her the slightest nod, as if to say, "I'll protect you." The silence was broken by a loud knock at the door. Mr. Ade rushed to open it, revealing two police officers flanked by stern-faced investigators. "Chief Babalola," one of them announced, "we have questions about your recent transactions and their implications." Deo turned his head sharply toward the officers. "You'll find everything you need," he said with measured calm. Amara's breath hitched. Did Deo mean he had provided evidence? If so, why? Her mind swirled with questions, but she dared not ask. As the officers escorted Chief Babalola from the room for questioning, he threw one last look over his shoulder at Amara and Deo. "This isn't over," he said darkly. Once alone, the room fell silent again. Deo approached Amara slowly, his voice gentle but firm. "Are you okay?" She nodded, but her trembling hands betrayed her fear. Deo reached out, his hand hovering just inches from hers. Their proximity sent a rush of warmth through her, a feeling she wasn't ready to name. Amara stepped back, breaking the moment. "Why did you speak to them like that? What do you know?" Deo hesitated, his expression unreadable. "I know enough to protect what matters." Before Amara could respond, Mr. Ade entered again, his face grim. "You both need to be careful. The chief won't let this go easily." The mansion grew quieter in the days following Chief Babalola's interrogation. Amara found herself in a strange state of limbo, unsure whether the worst had passed or if more trouble was brewing. Deo, however, remained vigilant, constantly watching for any signs of retaliation from his father. One late afternoon, Amara retreated to the estate's sunroom, a bright space filled with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the sprawling gardens. The golden rays of the setting sun bathed the room in warmth. She sat by a small round table, her hands resting on a cup of tea she had no intention of drinking. Deo appeared in the doorway, his presence breaking her thoughts. "I thought I'd find you here," he said softly, stepping into the room. Amara didn't look up. "I don't know how much more of this I can take, Deo. It feels like I'm walking on glass, waiting for it to shatter." Deo moved closer, standing by the window. The light illuminated his face, highlighting the tension in his features. "You're stronger than you think, Amara. My father doesn't intimidate you, and that says a lot." Amara finally looked at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and fear. "What if he finds out about us?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Deo turned to her fully, his expression unreadable. "There is no us," he said firmly, though his tone wavered slightly. "Not yet." The weight of his words hung in the air, heavy with the unspoken emotions between them. Deo reached for a small folded paper in his pocket and placed it on the table. "This might help," he said. Amara stared at the note, hesitant to open it. Deo left the room without another word, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the rising storm outside. Amara sat in the sunroom long after Deo had left, staring at the folded paper he had given her. The room, once warm with the sunset, now grew dim as the evening crept in. With trembling hands, she opened the note. It contained a single sentence. "Meet me at the West Garden tonight. There's something you need to know." Amara's heart raced. The West Garden was secluded, far from the mansion's prying eyes. What could Deo want to tell her that required such secrecy? As the household settled for the night, Amara slipped out of her room, her steps cautious but determined. The air outside was crisp, the scent of flowers mingling with the faint sound of distant crickets. She found Deo waiting near the old fountain, his silhouette illuminated by the moonlight. "You came," he said softly, stepping toward her. Amara folded her arms, her voice a whisper. "What is this about, Deo? What's so important?" Deo hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "I've been working to uncover the truth about my father's dealings, and I think I've found something that could change everything." Amara's breath hitched. "What kind of truth?" Before Deo could answer, the rustle of leaves behind them made them both freeze. They turned to see Mr. Ade emerging from the shadows, his expression cold. "You should both be careful where you meet," he said, his voice laced with warning. "The chief isn't as blind as you think." Deo stepped protectively in front of Amara, his tone sharp. "What are you doing here, Ade? Spying for my father?" Mr. Ade smirked. "I follow orders, Deo. And right now, my orders are to ensure nothing disrupts the chief's plans, including you." The tension was suffocating. Amara felt trapped, her heart pounding as the men squared off. Deo's fists clenched, but he held his ground. "You're making a mistake, Ade," Deo said coldly. "If my father's empire falls, you'll go down with it." Mr. Ade's smirk faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "Maybe. But at least I know my place." With that, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Amara and Deo alone once more. Deo exhaled, turning back to Amara. "We don't have much time. We need to act before my father does." Amara nodded, though fear gripped her. "What do you need me to do?" The silence in the garden after Mr. Ade's departure was deafening. Amara clutched her gown, her mind racing with the implications of what she had just heard. Deo, standing beside her, was tense, his jaw tight as he stared into the shadows where Mr. Ade had disappeared. "We can't stay here," Deo finally said, his voice low but urgent. "If my father sent him, there's no telling what else he has planned." Amara nodded, her voice trembling. "Where do we go? What do we do?" Deo placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch steadying her. "There's someone I trust, a journalist. If we can get the evidence to her, we can expose everything." Amara's eyes widened. "You've had evidence all this time?" Deo hesitated, then pulled a small flash drive from his pocket. "It's all here, transactions, deals, and more. Enough to dismantle my father's empire." Before she could respond, a harsh voice cut through the air. "You won't get the chance." They both spun around to see Chief Babalola stepping out from the shadows, his face a mask of fury. Behind him, two burly guards emerged, their presence imposing. "You think you can betray me, my own son?" the chief spat, his voice laced with venom. "You think I didn't see this coming?" Deo stepped in front of Amara, his posture protective. "It's over, father. The truth is out, and you can't stop it." Chief Babalola let out a low, menacing laugh. "Oh, but I can. You see, Deo, loyalty is everything. And if you won't give it willingly, I'll take it by force." One of the guards stepped forward, and Amara's heart raced. "Deo, don't," she started, but it was too late. The guards lunged at Deo, and a scuffle ensued. Amara screamed as the flash drive slipped from Deo's hand, landing on the ground. In the chaos, she grabbed it and started to run, her heart pounding in her chest. "Get her!" Chief Babalola roared. Amara ran blindly through the garden, the sound of footsteps chasing her. She clutched the flash drive tightly, her only thought of escape. The shadows of the garden seemed to close in around her as she neared the edge of the estate. Just as she reached the tall iron gates, a hand grabbed her arm, spinning her around. She gasped, staring into the eyes of one of the guards. "Give it to me," he demanded. Amara shook her head, her grip tightening on the flash drive. "You'll have to take it from me," she whispered, defiance burning in her eyes. Suddenly, a loud shout echoed through the night, followed by the sound of someone approaching. Amara turned her head just in time to see Deo running toward them, his face bruised but determined. The guard tightened his grip on her arm, but before he could act, the screen went black. To be continued. If you like this story, comment part 2 in the comment section and give us a thumbs up. Also subscribe. Thank you.